Welcome back, guys, to Wrong Turn Horror. In this episode, I'm sharing 10 true Christmas road trip horror stories. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so YouTube shows you stories like this next time. Also, let us know from where you are watching and what time it is there. On December 23, 2019, the night was so violently cold that the snow looked like it was falling in thick sheets of static. 27-year-old Jacob Miles gripped the steering wheel of his sedan as he pushed through the isolated stretch of Highway 46, the loneliest winter road in Northern California. He was heading home for Christmas, a small visit to his mother, who had been sick that year and wanted him home more than she admitted. Jacob had promised her he wouldn't be late, even though a blizzard warning had already rolled across the region. He didn't want to break her heart again, not after spending so much of the past year buried in overtime shifts at the warehouse, ignoring his own exhaustion and burying his failed relationship behind work. The radio played faint Christmas music, distorted by static. Outside the windshield, the world was a white tunnel of snow and shadows. His tires clicked on ice patches every so often, and the wipers juddered as they tried to clear the thickening frost. Jacob muttered curses under his breath about the storm arriving early, trying to convince himself he wasn't nervous even though the temperature felt like it was dropping inside the car. Past mile marker 117, when something on the road made him slam the brakes so hard the car skidded. His heart jumped into his throat as the tires scraped against black ice. In the middle of the road, illuminated by the soft glow of his headlights, stood a man wearing a long red coat trimmed with white fan, old-fashioned Santa-like coat, the kind you'd see in classic postcards. The man was motionless, head tilted downwards as if studying the snow beneath him. Jacob's mind scrambled to make sense of it. Who on earth would be out here in the middle of a blizzard? The man lifted his head slowly, and Jacob saw the smile stretched too wide, too long, like the skin of his face was being pulled by invisible hooks. Jacob froze where he sat, unable to breathe. Then, before Jacob could react, the man stepped forward into the car's headlights and vanished. Not stepped aside, not ran, just disappeared. Jacob stumbled out of the car, boots sinking into snow, breath turning into thick clouds. His heartbeat pulsed in his ears as he circled the front of the car, expecting to find a mangled body. But there was nothing. No footprints. No drag marks, no sign anyone had been there at all. Only the relentless wind. Fear coiled inside his stomach, but he forced himself back into the car, locking the doors and speeding forward, convincing himself he'd hallucinated. But 20 minutes later, he saw the red coat again. This time, the man stood beside a pine tree at the edge of the forest, only barely visible through the swirling snow. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He simply watched the car pass, his head slightly tilted like he was studying Jacob. Jacob's breath caught. No, no, please. His hands trembled on the wheel. Snow slammed against the car as he pressed the gas harder. His phone's service bars flickered and disappeared. The storm thickened until the world outside felt dreamlike white, shapeless, dead silent except for the wind. 10 minutes later, Jacob saw the red coat again, this time in the rearview mirror, standing directly on the center of the road behind him. Closer, much closer. Jacob jerked the mirror up so he couldn't see it anymore. The further he drove, the more the atmosphere changed. The cold inside the car became unnatural, as if the heater was failing even though the control was still on. Frost crept across the inside edges of the windshield. The radio crackled, and for a split second, Jacob could have sworn he heard breathing through the static. Then, in the back seat behind him, a quiet whisper floated through the air. "Behind you," Jacob nearly screamed. He turned sharply. No one was there. The back seat was empty. His mind raced, desperate for logic. The exhaustion, the snow, the fear, all of it was messing with him. But at mile marker 139, he saw something that made his stomach drop. A wooden sign nailed to a post beside the road. The words were faded, cracked from years of storms, but still readable. "Turn back. Do not stop for the Christmas hitchhiker." Jacob slammed the brakes again and stared at the sign. Memories surfaced, old legends from when he was a kid. His uncle telling him stories around winter bonfires. The tale of the Christmas hitchhiker, a spirit or a man, depending on the version, who froze to death on Highway 46 decades ago when no one stopped to help him. People claimed he appeared in a long red coat, always smiling, always waiting. And if you saw him once, you'd see him again, closer each time, until he reached your car. Jacob's mouth went dry. No, he thought. It's just a story. A stupid winter legend. But the cold spreading inside the car felt too real to ignore. A soft knock hit the rear window. Jacob didn't look. His brain screamed at him not to. He floored the gas, speeding forward even though visibility was nearly zero. The storm pushed against him like a living thing. Then it happened. Through the roar of wind and snow, the man stepped onto the road again, this time directly in front of the car. Jacob jerked the wheel and the car spun violently. His vision blurred. The world tilted. He felt himself flipping. He heard glass shatter, metal crunch. His body thrown like a ragdoll, then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, he was leaning over the steering wheel. Airbag deflated. Blood trickled down his forehead. Snow drifted through a shattered window. The storm was quieter now, but still strong. Jacob groaned, testing his limbs. Sore, bruised, but not broken. He pushed the door open and staggered into the snow, trying to find signal, another car, anything. The forest loomed around him like a wall of black knives. His breath fogged thickly in front of him. He whispered a shaky hello, hoping anyone might be nearby. That's when he heard footsteps in the snow behind him, slow, calm, deliberate. Jacob turned, heart slamming in his chest, and there he was. The man in the red coat, just 10 feet away. Snow fell around him softly, no flakes touching his coat. His smile was wider now, stretching impossibly far. Jacob stumbled backward, whispering, "Please, don't." But the man didn't move. He simply tilted his head with a curious expression, like watching a wounded animal. Then, in a blink, he was suddenly standing behind Jacob, cold hands clamped onto Jacob's shoulders. Jacob screamed and tore himself free, sprinting blindly into the woods. Branches slapped his face, snow dragged at his boots, and his lungs burned. He didn't care where he was going. He only knew he had to get away. He didn't look back, but he heard the footsteps always behind him, always unhurried. Like the man knew Jacob wouldn't get far. After what felt like forever, Jacob collapsed into the snow, gasping for breath. His vision cleared enough to see a small cabin, a header, dark outline with a sagging roof and an old wreath, hanging crooked on the door. Hope surged through him. He scrambled to his feet and stumbled toward it, throwing himself inside, and slamming the door shut. He locked it, then pushed a chair under the knob, then shoved a table against the chair. His body shook violently as he backed away from the door, each breath sharp and painful. The cabin was dark and cold, a dead fireplace, dusty shelves, a single lantern hanging from a ceiling hook, swaying slightly even though the air was still. Jacob pressed his back against the wall, praying he had outrun the thing. Minutes passed. He couldn't hear anything outside except the faint howl of the storm. Then the knocking started, soft taps at first, gentle, polite. Someone visiting a neighbor on Christmas Eve. Jacob clamped a hand over his mouth, trying to silence the shaky breaths. Then he heard a voice, warm, familiar voice. Jacob. Sweetheart, open the door. It's me. It was his mother's voice. Jacob's blood ran cold. No, no, you're not real. Another knock, harder this time. Be a good boy, let me in. It's cold out here. Jacob felt tears burning in his eyes. The doorknob twisted. The wood creaked. He scrambled back, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The cabin fell silent again. No footsteps, no whispering, nothing. Jacob waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5. His breath slowly steadied. Maybe it was gone. Just as he let a sliver of hope into his mind, a whisper brushed the back of his ear. The same voice as before, only this time impossibly close. Found you, Jacob screamed. And the rest was swallowed by the storm. 3 days after Christmas, road patrol found Jacob's car half buried in snow. The scene was strange. No footprints around the vehicle, only a long track leading toward the woods, stopping abruptly as if whatever walked there was lifted into the air. Officers discovered the old cabin nearby. The door was broken inward. No sign of Jacob, but inside, lying neatly on the floor, they found a long red coat covered in frost. Beneath it sat Jacob's phone, frozen, cracked. The last voice memo on it captured Jacob's trembling whisper. He keeps finding me. Someone please. Don't drive Highway 46 at night. Don't stop for the man in the red coat. The recording ended with a sharp inhale and a soft thump, like the phone dropping from his hand. Jacob Miles was never found. Search teams combed the woods for 5 days before the storm buried the area in 10 more inches of snow. And every Christmas Eve since then, drivers report seeing a man in a long red coat standing at the side of Highway 46, smiling patiently as cars pass by. Some say he steps onto the road if you're alone. Others say he waves, but most say that if you make eye contact with him even once, you'll see him again and again closer each team until, eventually, you don't make it home for Christmas. On December 20th, 2016, the snowstorm over Montana was so brutal that it erased the road, the sky, and almost every sign of life along Interstate 90. 32-year-old Emily Carter gripped the steering wheel of her Jeep as she crawled through the storm at barely 30 miles per hour. She was on a Christmas trip to meet her fiancé's family in Idaho, her first time spending the holidays with them. She'd left later than she planned after a delayed shift at the hospital where she worked. And now the winter darkness pressed against her windows like a living thing. The wind shrieked around the car, making the doors vibrate. Christmas lights were nowhere, no towns, no cabins, not even distant farmhouses. It was just her, the long stretch of trees, and the endless roar of the storm. Her fiancé, Mark, had begged her to wait until morning, but Emily wanted to surprise him by arriving early. She whispered to herself, "It's fine, just snow, just a storm." But deep inside, an uneasiness crawled like something old waking up beneath the ice. The temperature inside the car dipped, even with the heater on full blast. Every so often, something thumped softly on the roof. Probably thick snow chunks sliding off branches overhead, or so she tried to believe. About an hour past Missoula, Emily noticed something strange. A flicker of orange somewhere far ahead on the right side of the road. Not headlights, not taillights. It looked more like the glow of a fire. She slowed instinctively, leaning forward to peer through the frost-streaked windshield. As she approached, she saw a car pulled over onto the shoulder, a dark SUV end next to it. A small campfire burning unnaturally bright in the blizzard. Her stomach tightened. Who would start a fire in this storm? And why hadn't it blown out? She passed slowly, staring at the flames. That was when she saw him, a man kneeling beside the fire, wearing a heavy coat but no gloves, no hat, no scarf. His hair was stiff with frost, his face pale. He didn't look up, didn't react to her car at all. He simply held his hands inches above the fire. But Emily noticed something chilling. The snow hitting the flames didn't melt. It turned to ash mid-air. Emily shivered violently. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She pressed the gas, refusing to look back. But less than 10 minutes later, she saw another fire, and another stranded vehicle. This time a minivan, its doors open, the inside dark. A fire burned in the ditch beside it. And again, a person knelt by the flames, this time a woman, motionless, staring into the blaze like she was frozen in place. Emily's breathing quickened. Her heartbeat hammered. She whispered, "No, no, no." The storm thickened so much she could barely see, and each time the wind screamed against the windows, she imagined it was someone calling her name. Her phone had no service. The GPS flickered. The temperature gauge dropped non-stop despite the heater struggling. The warmth that should have filled the car never came. As she reached a long bend in the highway, she spotted yet another fire, a massive one, like a bonfire. And next to it wasn't a single abandoned vehicle, but 3 of them. Cars scattered across the shoulder, some with headlights still on, some half buried in snow. Shapes stood by the flames, not sitting, not kneeling, standing, completely still. 6, maybe 7 people. Their silhouettes were sharp and unmoving, like frozen statues. Emily's mouth went dry. She couldn't help it. She slowed down, staring through the snow. One of the figures turned its head toward her car, even though its body didn't move at all. Just the head, slowly, too slowly. The face was pale, hollow, eyes so dark they looked like sockets. Emily gasped and slammed the accelerator. Her tires skidded, the Jeep fishtailing before gripping again. The road behind her disappeared in whiteout conditions. The fire vanished. The figures vanished. But the terror clung to her like frostbite. 30 minutes later, Emily realized something horrible. She hadn't passed another exit, rest area, sign, or mile marker since she'd seen the second fire. It felt like the road was looping endlessly. She checked her GPS again. The screen glitched, her car icon spinning in a circle like the system couldn't locate her. "This isn't real," she whispered. "I'm tired. It's the storm messing with my head." But deep down, she knew something unnatural was happening on the interstate. The heater sputtered, blowing cold air now. Ice formed on the inside edges of the windshield. Snow drifted into the vents even though that was impossible. Emily brushed her hair back with shaking hands, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Then she saw another figure, a man standing right in the middle of her lane. There was no fire beside him, no vehicle, nothing, just him, standing in the snow like he'd been waiting for her specifically. Emily slammed the brakes, tires screaming against the ice. The Jeep slid, swerving sideways, but stopped just in time. The man didn't flinch, didn't move. The snow hit him and melted instantly against his skin. He wore no coat this time, just thin clothes that should have frozen him solid. His eyes were pale white, as if blind, but he was staring right at her. Emily grabbed her phone, just out of instinct, even though she knew there was no service. The man slowly lifted his arm and pointed down the road behind her. Emily shook her head violently. No, I'm not going back." She put the car in reverse, thinking she could drive around him, but the Jeep spun out again, almost slamming into the guardrail. When she looked forward again, the man was suddenly closer 10 feet from the hood. Emily screamed and floored the gas, swerving past him. As she passed, she saw something chilling. His lips moved. He whispered a single word, something that sounded like "stay." The car jolted with a violent thump, like something had landed on the roof. Emily cried out, hands trembling so hard she almost lost control. She didn't slow down. Didn't dare. Something scraped along the top of the car, metal against metal, slow and deliberate. She could hear it shifting, its weight crawling. She screamed again, tears blurring her vision. The scraping stopped. The storm grew impossibly silent for a moment. Then a face pressed against the side window, upside down. The same pale eyes, the same frozen expression. Emily nearly blacked out from terror. She swerved again, hitting a patch of ice. The Jeep spun and crashed into Asno. WBANK. The world went silent. Her headlights flickered weakly, illuminating the storm in a weak cone of gold. Emily sat frozen in her seat, breath shaking, tears falling. She forced herself to turn her head toward the window. Nothing. The pale face was gone. She grabbed her flashlight and pushed the door open, stumbling into the knee-deep snow. Her legs trembled violently as she checked the top of the Jeep. No footprints, no handprints, no indentations. But the entire roof was covered in deep claw marks, thin, carved straight through the paint and metal, like someone had dragged fingers, made of bone. The forest beside the highway was pitch black. She shined the flashlight toward the trees. Every branch swayed silently. The storm had lessened, like something was holding the wind back. Emily whispered, "Help. Someone please," but her voice was swallowed by the dark. She stumbled forward, trying to find another car, a mile marker, anything. Her flashlight flickered. The cold stung her face like needles. She realized she'd left her coat inside the Jeep, but she couldn't go back. She felt something watching her, hidden beyond the tree line. Then, ahead of her, she saw another fire. This one was small, soft, glowing like a lantern, and beside it sat a single figure kneeling, facing away from her, unmoving. Emily wanted to turn around. Everything in her screamed to go back, but she needed help. She needed warmth, She approached slowly, footsteps crunching softly. "Hello, are you okay?" The figure didn't react. Emily circled around, shining her flashlight. It was a child, a young girl, maybe 8 or 9, wearing a simple dress completely wrong for the weather. Her hair was stiff with frost, her skin pale and cracked like porcelain left in a freezer. She held her hands near the flames but cast no shadow. Emily choked on a sob. "What happened to you? Are you lost?" The girl didn't blink, didn't breathe. Emily reached out hesitantly. The girl turned her head slowly and Emily saw her face, hollow eyes, lips blackened with frostbite. And when she spoke, her voice was both a whisper and a distant echo. "Don't stay out here. They'll find you." Emily staggered back, shaking. Who will find me?" The girl lifted one cracked finger and pointed at the forest behind. Emily turned. Dozens of figures stood between the trees. Pale faces, sunken eyes, all watching her. Silhouettes frozen in every unnatural posture, imaginably kneeling, standing, crouching, even hanging from branches. Every single one of them motionless, waiting. Emily screamed and ran blindly, falling through deep snow, losing her flashlight. She didn't know which direction she was going. The world spun. Her lungs burned. She stumbled into the road again, sobbing hysterically. The storm suddenly roared back with full force, almost knocking her to her knees. She could barely see. Everything was white. Everything was noise. Then she heard singing, soft, sweet, almost like distant Christmas. Carolers, but the melody was wrong. The notes were twisted, dragging, broken. She backed away slowly as several of the pale figures emerged from the snow, walking toward her in jerky, unnatural movements. Their mouths hung open as the horrible carol poured out. Emily turned and ran, but the road beneath her feet was gone. The snow gave way. She plunged into freezing darkness. She woke up in a hospital 2 days later. A snowplow driver had spotted her lying unconscious by the guardrail at dawn on December 21st. No jeep. Asterisk snow hammered the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists as Daniel Myers fought to keep his Jeep steady on the narrow highway cutting through the mountains of northern Idaho. It was December 23rd. The sky black as ink, the road empty except for the twisting patterns left by wind-blown flakes. To keep himself awake, he turned up the heater and the static-filled Christmas radio station. But even the cheerful music sounded warped, hollow, as if dragged through the storm by something unseen. He had left Spokane late, hoping to make it to his sister's cabin before midnight. But the weather turned vicious faster than the forecast warned. The highway US 95 was notorious in winter, known for its deadly ice patches and sudden whiteouts, and for the stories locals told about things seen walking the roadside at night. But Daniel wasn't a believer in ghost tales. He was exhausted, hungry, and frustrated. When the low fuel warning blinked in angry orange across the dashboard, he cursed under his breath. He checked his GPS. It showed a small icon, last. Fuel for 40 miles, Pine Hollow Gas and Mart. He didn't remember ever seeing it before. Maybe it was new, or maybe the map updated recently. Regardless, he didn't have a choice. The storm was swallowing the mountains whole. He drove another 10 minutes before a faint glow appeared through the curtains of snow, an isolated patch of yellowish light shimmering on the roadside like a beacon. As he drew closer, the shape of an old gas station materialized, 2 pumps under a sagging metal canopy, a small store with dark windows, and a flickering neon sign that sputtered, Pine Hollow Gas. The place looked abandoned, or at least barely functional. No other cars, no tracks in the snow, no movement. Yet the open sign glowed weakly in the window. Daniel pulled up beside the first pump, killed the engine, and listened. Nothing, not even wind, just an unnatural stillness that immediately scraped against his nerves. He stepped out, boots crunching into snow that looked untouched for days. The cold felt heavier here, more deliberate, as if pressing down on him. He swiped his card, but the screen displayed pay inside. He groaned, zipped his coat, and started toward the door. The lights inside the store flickered, buzzing intermittently like insects trapped in glass. When he pushed the door open, a bell chimed overhead, sharp, old-fashioned metal ring. The smell hit him first. Stale wood, dust, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood mixed with cold air. The aisles were narrow and dim, stocked with outdated snacks and canned goods that looked decades old. A faded Christmas tree sat in the corner, lights blinking erratically, ornaments cracked and yellowed. Behind the counter sat a man, pale, gaunt, wearing a heavy flannel jacket despite being indoors. His eyes were sunken, almost colorless, and his face carried an expression frozen somewhere between exhaustion and dread. "Evening," the man rasped, voice rough, as if unused. "Just need to pay for pump 1, Daniel said, forcing a polite smile. The attendant nodded slowly. "Fill him up this late." "Storm's real bad. I'm heading to Priest Lake," Daniel replied. The man stared at him for a moment too long. "You shouldn't be on the road tonight." Daniel chuckled nervously. "Yeah, well, I don't have much choice." "You always have a choice," the attendant muttered, sliding the credit machine forward. Something about his tone made Daniel's skin prickle. He paid quickly. The man didn't hand him a receipt, didn't look up again. Just whispered, "If you see something on the pass, don't stop. No matter what." Daniel blinked. What?" But the man didn't answer. He just slowly raised one skeletal finger and pointed toward the window. Daniel turned to look at everything outside was white, swirling, shifting with the wind. When he looked back at the counter, the attendant's eyes were closed, as if he'd fallen into a trance. Daniel hesitated, then stepped out of the store. As the door closed behind him, he felt the temperature drop sharply, his breath turning thick and white in the air. He filled the tank as fast as he could. Halfway through, he heard something behind him, soft footsteps on snow. Human footsteps. He turned. No one. But the footsteps continued, crunching rhythmically, slowly circling him. He spun around, heart pounding. Nothing but the abandoned station, the empty road, and a wall of storm. The pump clicked off. Daniel lunged into his jeep, locked the doors, and started driving. The storm grew worse as he ascended the winding mountain pass. The visibility shrank to a few feet. His headlights illuminated swirling sheets of white that threw strange shadows across the road. Then he saw it at first. It looked like a person walking along the shoulder. A tall figure, thin, barefoot, wearing what looked like a torn hospital gown that fluttered in the wind. Daniel's stomach dropped. The figure moved slowly, dragging one foot behind like it was broken. As he approached, he realized the person wasn't walking, they were swaying, like dangling from an invisible rope. Suspended, He blinked hard. The figure turned its head sharply toward him, revealing a face pale as bone and stretched unnaturally long, with hollow eyes staring directly into his. Daniel slammed the brakes, the Jeep skidding on ice. He panicked and jerked the wheel, narrowly avoiding sliding off the cliff edge. When he steadied the vehicle and looked back, the figure was gone. His breath shook. His heartbeat thundered. He forced himself forward. The radio crackled, then sputtered, switching channels on its own until it landed on a faint, whispering static. He turned the knobs. Nothing changed. The whispering grew louder, clearer, forming fragments of words. Don't stop. Keep going. It's with you. Daniel shut the radio off, but the whisper didn't stop, now came from the back seat. He spun around, nobody there. He gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles whitened. I'm hallucinating, he muttered. Just tired. Just the storm messing with my head. Then he saw the second figure. This one stood directly in the middle of the road. Daniel swerved violently, barely missing it. The Jeep fishtailed, bouncing off a snowbank before regaining traction. He gasped for air. His eyes watered from fear, frustration, disbelief. But the worst part wasn't the shadowy outline of the figure, was the fact that its face was completely covered with what looked like a frozen mask of ice, and its jaw hung open far wider than humanly possible. As he drove past, its head snapped toward him, tracking him with unnatural precision. Daniel hit the gas harder. No, 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 he whispered, chest tightening. This isn't real. This isn't real. But the figures kept appearing. First one, then another, then three together. All moving, wrong-jerking, bending, twitching like puppets with cut strings. Some crawled, some shuffled, some hovered a few inches above the snow. Daniel's trembling hands clutched the steering wheel as he maneuvered through them, heart hammering against his ribs. At one point, he saw a childlike figure crouched by the roadside, clutching a snow-covered teddy bear. When his headlights swept across it, the child lifted its face-empty eye socket's mouth, filled with jagged icicles, screamed a sound so high-pitched he heard it even through the sealed windows. He wept without realizing. Minutes saw, maybe hours passed. The road twisted deeper into the pass. Daniel's wipers struggled to clear the ice forming rapidly on the windshield. His Jeep's temperature gauge dipped unnaturally low, the air inside turning frigid despite the blasting heater. Then a new sound emerged, tapping, faint at first. From the roof, tap, tap. Daniel stared upward. The tapping grew louder, faster. Crawling noises followed like fingernails dragging across metal. Then footsteps. Something was on top of the Jeep. His pulse spiked. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The creature, or whatever it was, matched his speed effortlessly. He felt the vehicle shift slightly under weight. Then a long crack appeared across the windshield, spreading like a web. The thing above him pressed down. Daniel screamed and swerved. The Jeep slid across the icy lane, nearly tumbling down the embankment before he regained control. The tapping stopped. The weight vanished. But then the shape appeared in the road ahead, again the same tall, long-faced figure he'd first seen. This time its mouth was open impossibly wide, stretching down to its chest, revealing rows of jagged ice teeth. Its arms extended unnaturally toward him, as if reaching to grab the Jeep. Daniel turned sharply, but the tires lost grip. The Jeep spun, sliding sideways, and crashed into a snowdrift with violent force, Silence. He sat dazed, head throbbing, breaths shallow. The engine sputtered and died. Snowflakes swirled in through a cracked window. He tried starting the Jeep. Nothing. The battery was dead. The interior lights flickered once, then faded out. Darkness swallowed him. He grabbed his phone. It had service earlier. Now, no signal. His flashlight barely worked, flickering weakly. He took a deep breath, trying to think. He had emergency gear in the trunk. He could wait until daylight. But then he saw movement outside, dark shapes slowly surrounding the Jeep. Not rushing, not attacking, just circling, watching. Their eyes, if they were eyes, glowed faintly blue. Daniel's breath hitched. He locked the doors, even though he knew it wouldn't matter. The whispering returned, this time from all sides. The voices layered over each other, men, women, children pleading, crying, begging him to let them in, promising warmth, promising safety. It's cold out here. Let us in, please. Open the door. Then came a new voice. A familiar one, his sister, Danny. Help me, please. Please let me in. His heart collapsed. No, no, no. You're not real, the voice repeated, cracking with sobs. Danny. Please, it's so cold. Snow swirled across the winding Colorado backroads like a living thing, curling through the trees, sweeping across the frozen asphalt, and pressing against the windshield of Mia, Carter's rental car, as she drove deeper into the mountains on Christmas Eve. She was exhausted, running on caffeine and stubbornness, heading toward her parents' new cabin for the first time. Her flight had been delayed for hours. And then the rental company messed up her booking, leaving her with a small sedan rather than the SUV she'd reserved. But she was determined to make it home before midnight, even though each mile of road felt more isolated and sinister, as if the world behind her was slowly dissolving into storm and silence. Her GPS displayed a simple route: Highway 160 west, then a short mountain pass, then the Straight Creek Tunnel. She'd driven through dozens of tunnels in her life, but tonight, the thought of entering a long, dark tube of concrete filled her chest with a strange heaviness she couldn't explain. The radio crackled between stations, never settling, until it finally gave up and fell silent, leaving only the sound of tires slicing through snow. When the low fuel light blinked on, she cursed softly. Another mistake. She should have refueled back in town. But the GPS assured her, toll tunnel 6 miles. That was close enough. Once she crossed through, there would be a gas station on the other side. Only a little longer. The road narrowed as she climbed higher, the forest growing denser, looming over the road with branches heavy under fresh snow. The sky turned pitch black, lit only by the faint glow of her headlights. Mia felt a pressure and odd sense of being watched from within the trees, as though something cold and patient walked parallel to her, hidden just beyond the edges of visibility. She shook her head, trying to ignore the tension knotting her stomach. Just a storm. Just darkness. Nothing more. Finally, the entrance of the Straight Creek Tunnel appeared, carved into the mountain like a gaping mouth, its orange lights flickering faintly through the storm. The tunnel sign glowed with frost-covered bulbs. Straight Creek Drive, with caution, no stopping. Mia exhaled with relief and guided the car toward the entrance, feeling the wind die instantly as she crossed the threshold into the artificial warmth of concrete and dim lights. Her phone buzzed no signal. She expected that. Tunnels always killed reception. The moment she entered, the claustrophobia hit. The walls felt too close, the roof too low, the lights too far apart. Her headlights cast long shadows that bent and crawled across the walls. She gripped the steering wheel tighter and pressed forward, focusing on the faint dot of darkness far ahead that marked the exit. But after several minutes, she realized something was wrong. The exit wasn't getting closer. The tunnel wasn't curving, wasn't changing. It looked exactly the same as the moment she entered, same cracked tiles, same overhead lamps, same distance to the end. She squinted. Maybe the storm outside was messing with her perception. She sped up slightly. The exit remained the same distance away. Her breathing quickened. She checked her odometer. She had already driven nearly 2 miles. The tunnel was only 1.7 miles long. She should have been out the other end already. She slowed the car. The exit remained unchanged. No growth, no approach, just stillness. Like an image projected on a wall, a chill crawled up her spine. She looked in the rearview mirror. Her headlights illuminated the tunnel behind her, long, empty, dim. But then, as she watched, one of the overhead lights flickered and went out. Then another. One by one, the darkness crept toward her, swallowing the tunnel behind her like a closing throat. She panicked and slammed her foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, but the exit remained exactly the same distance away. The darkness behind her drew closer, devouring each light with slow, deliberate precision. Her pulse thundered. She whispered to herself, "Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop." She floored the accelerator. The car roared through the tunnel, but it didn't matter. The exit didn't move. The tunnel didn't change. The darkness didn't slow. It kept advancing, steadily, swallowing everything in its path. Her breath shook. She honked the horn out of desperation. The sound echoed endlessly, bouncing around her like the tunnel was far bigger than it appeared. Then the radio turned on by itself, static, soft at first, then rising like a scream stuck inside the wires. She reached to shut it off, but a voice emerged through the static, a whisper, a man's voice. "Don't look back." Mia's hand froze. She stared at the radio, heart pounding so violently it hurt. The voice repeated, louder, distorted, "Don't look back." She trembled, her mind unraveling. She didn't want to look. She couldn't. But human curiosity was a cruel instinct. She slowly turned her head toward the mirror. Something was there. Not a person. Not an animal. A shape long, skeletal, stretched unnaturally thin, crawling on the ceiling of the tunnel behind her, clinging to the tiles with elongated limbs like a monstrous spider. Its face, or what resembled a face, was pale, smooth, featureless, except for a wide, toothless mouth that opened and closed silently as it moved. Its body twitched with jerky, unnatural motions, like something learning how to use limbs that weren't meant for it. And it was faster than her car, faster than anything she had ever seen. It scuttled along the ceiling with such speed she felt the roof of her car vibrate with each movement. She screamed and slammed the gas pedal again, but the speed didn't matter. The tunnel refused to end. The creature closed the distance, its limbs scraping against the tiles with harsh, brittle sounds. Her mirrors shook violently. She grabbed one and forcefully pushed it aside to avoid seeing it. The voice on the radio returned. "Don't look at it." Mia sobbed. I know. The lights overhead flickered rapidly, distorting the creature's twitching form with strobe-like flashes. Then a loud metallic thump hit the roof. The creature was on top. She screamed, ducking instinctively as the roof dented inward. Another thump, another. A long crack split across the windshield. She swerved violently from terror alone, the tires screeching even on the slick ground. The creature's limbs scraped the sides of the car, dragging along the doors, leaving long, jagged indentations. She burst into hysterical tears. Please, stop, please. But the tunnel kept stretching, endless, eternal, cruel. Then her engine sputtered. She froze. No, not now. Not here. The fuel gauge sank, too empty. The car jerked. The headlights dimmed. Static screamed from the radio. The windshield cracked further as the creature pressed down. Mia slammed her fists against the steering wheel. No, don't die. Don't die. The car choked, slowed, coasted, and stopped. Her entire body went rigid. Silence fell. The tunnel lights hummed faintly. The creature no longer moved. It clung to the roof like a giant insect, completely still, waiting, listening. Mia held her breath. Every muscle in her body tightened. The radio whispered again, softer now, as if fading. If you want to live, get out. She shook her head violently. No, I can't. Get out, the voice insisted. Run. She closed her eyes. No, run. No, run. Something slammed the roof again, hard enough to send shards of glass raining from the cracked edges of the windshield. Mia shrieked and scrambled out of the driver's seat, flinging the door open. The cold concrete under her boots grounded her with cruel clarity. She grabbed her coat, phone, and began running straight toward the exit that never grew closer. The creature shrieked behind her, an ear-splitting sound like metal tearing apart. She didn't dare look back. Her footsteps echoed in a frantic rhythm. The lights overhead flickered and burst, showering sparks. The tunnel darkened. The creature was gaining on her. She felt its hot, foul breath scraping the back of her neck. She pushed harder, lungs burning, legs trembling. Please, she screamed into the void. Let me out. The exit suddenly flickered like a dying light bulb. Then it moved. It grew larger, closer, real. Mia sobbed in relief and sprinted harder. The creature screeched. The tunnel shook. Her phone buzzed, in her pocket a signal returning. The exit grew brighter, brighter. She could almost feel the cold mountain air waiting on the other side. She lunged, reaching for the light, and fell. She hit pavement covered in fresh snow, skidding several feet before rolling to a stop. The world around her was silent. She gasped, coughing violently, then scrambled upright. She was outside. The tunnel entrance behind her was dark, no lights, no humming, no creature. Just a black hole in the mountain. Her heart throbbed painfully. She staggered toward the roadside guardrail, hands shaking uncontrollably. Snow fell gently. The storm had calmed. She turned back, toward the tunnel, and froze. There was no sign, no name, no lights. It didn't look like the Straight Creek Tunnel at all. It looked old, abandoned, sealed off for decades. A rusted metal gate hung crooked across the entrance, padlocked shut, coated in thick frost. No, Mia whispered. That's not possible. I just She turned, expecting to see her car somewhere behind her, maybe stalled near the exit. But there was nothing. No car, no tire tracks. Nothing but untouched snow. Her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out with trembling hands. She had full bars. The time read 3:11 a.m., December 26th. She'd lost nearly 2 days. She stumbled toward the road, numb with shock. A distant pair of headlights approached slowly, cautiously. A snowplow. She waved frantically. The truck stopped beside her, and the driver, gruff-looking older man, rolled down the window, eyes widening. The snow had turned the Arizona desert into something unrecognizable, blanketing cactus fields and redstone ridges beneath a layer of white that looked beautiful from a distance and deadly up close. It was Christmas Eve, and Lena Hart had been driving since noon, trying to make it from Phoenix to her grandmother's small ranch house in eastern Nevada before midnight. A yearly tradition she never missed. Except this year, the storm came early, sweeping across the desert in a freezing, unnatural wave that shut down major highways and forced thousands of travelers onto old backroads roads, like Route 12, a long, winding, mostly abandoned stretch of asphalt rarely used except by truckers and locals. Her phone had lost signal hours earlier, and the radio stations dissolved into static one by one until only silence remained, leaving her alone with the sound of tires crunching over permafrost and the wind, howling against the windows like a living creature. She wasn't too worried at first. She had driven this route dozens of times, but as twilight bled across the sky and the storm thickened into a wall of white fury, her confidence drained. By 7 p.m., visibility was barely a few feet, and the temperature had plummeted so sharply her breath fogged the air inside the car if the heater slipped even slightly. The gas gauge dipped lower and lower until the needle trembled near empty, and Lena felt panic coil tightly in her chest. There was only one gas station on the entire road, an old place called Harker's Pump and Shop, a relic from the 1960s known for staying open late during holidays. Her grandmother always joked that Harker's never closes, not even for God. It was an eerie saying she never understood until that night, when she saw the faint glow of its neon sign flickering through the blizzard like a dying star. Lena nearly cried with relief as she pulled into the lot, tires skidding over black ice. The place was dark except for the signer buzzing red light reading open 24 hours and one dim bulb above the doorway. The pumps were old-fashioned, the kind with manual levers and metal dials. The glass storefront was coated with frost, but she could see shelves inside and the faint outline of a counter. She gathered her coat, stepped out into the brutal cold, and rushed to the pump. It didn't turn on. She flicked the switch again. Nothing. "Come on," she muttered, stomping her boot. The cold sank into her bones. She hurried toward the store and pushed the door open, a small bell chiming overhead. Warm air hit her face, a shock after the cold, and she let out a shaky breath. Inside, the store looked like a time capsule. Racks of old snacks, dusty canned goods, faded signs advertising cigarettes from decades past. The fluorescent lights buzzed. A radio somewhere behind the counter played a crackling rendition of an old Christmas hymn. The singer's voice warped and slow. Then a man stepped into view, a tall, thin figure in a heavy green jacket and trucker hat, face obscured by shadow. "Evening," he said, voice low and smooth. Cold night, Lena nodded, nerves prickling under her skin. Yeah, really cold. The pump outside isn't working. The man tilted his head slightly. Ain't much that works out here during storms like this. I can start it from here, but we're on backup power, so it'll take a minute. She smiled with relief. Thank you. He stepped behind the counter, pulling an old switchboard from under the desk, flipping several metal toggles until a loud hum filled the store. There we go, give it a moment. Lena nodded and turned to head back outside, but something in the corner of her eye made her pause. A man was sitting at one of the old dining booths near the window, hunched forward, his coat draped loosely around him. He didn't move at all. She would have assumed he was asleep, but his posture was wrong, his head tilted slightly upward, chin raised, eyes staring directly at the ceiling. His mouth hung open just a fraction. She frowned. Something about him made the hair on her arms lift. Is he okay? She asked quietly. The clerk didn't look. Been waiting out the storm, he muttered. Folks get tired out here. But Lena didn't believe that. The man's hands were wrapped around a paper cup that sat on the table, yet the cup wasn't steaming. It looked frozen to his fingers. Before she could speak again, the clerk waved her off. Pump's ready. She nodded, uneasy, and hurried back outside. The pump had power now, the numbers blinking dimly. She lifted the nozzle, began fueling her tank, and tried to steady her breathing. The snow fell harder. The desert was gone beneath a blanket of white emptiness. She shivered and turned back toward the store, squinting through the frosted window, and froze. The man at the booth hadn't moved, but now she could see his face clearly. His skin was pale and naturally pale, and his eyes were glassy, clouded over like a corpse. His lips were blue. She dropped the nozzle. Fuel sprayed on her boots. She stumbled back, heart hammering, desperately trying to make sense of what she'd seen. She rushed back inside. The door chimed, ringing sharply as she pushed through. Hey, that man, he needs help, she shouted. The clerk looked up, raising an eyebrow slowly. What about him? She pointed, trembling. He's not breathing. He's dead. The clerk sighed softly, almost tiredly, rubbing the back of his neck. Been a long night, he murmured. Long night for all of us. Lena stared in disbelief. What is wrong with you? We need to call. She reached for her phone, but the screen was black, unresponsive. She slammed her thumb against the power button. Nothing. Dead? Call. The clerk asked softly. Who are you gonna call, girl? Ain't nobody coming out here. Roads shut down miles both ways. He stepped around the counter then, the fluorescent light hitting his face fully for the first time, and Lena felt ice crawl through her veins. His skin was pale, too pale, his cheeks sunken, his lips faintly blue. Frost clung to the edges of his eyelashes. He looked like a man who had been standing in the cold for hours, or like a man who hadn't taken a warm breath in a very long time. Lena backed away, pulse racing. I'm leaving. The clerk smiled, a slow, eerie curl of his lips. Ain't you forgetting your gas? She shook her head violently and bolted out the door, snow blasting against her face. She jumped into her car, turned the key, and nothing. The engine sputtered lifelessly. No, 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 no. She hit the wheel with her fists. The front door of the gas station creaked open. The clerk stepped out into the storm, walking slowly, calmly, like the cold didn't touch him. Lena locked her doors instantly, heart pounding in her throat. The clerk approached the car, eyes fixed on her. He reached the driver's side window and tapped gently, tap, 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 the sound too soft, too deliberate. She refused to look at him. Her hands shook violently as she turned the key again. The engine coughed, choked, died. The clerk leaned closer to the glass. "Storm's bad tonight," he said quietly. "Bad enough to bury a person." She squeezed her eyes shut. "Please, God, please." Another voice spoke, then but not the clerk's. This voice came from behind her car. A whisper, a woman's voice. "Help us." Lena froze. Slowly, she lifted her eyes to the rearview mirror. Figures, at least a dozen, standing in the snow behind her car. Men, women, even children. All pale, all motionless, all staring at her with hollow, frozen eyes. Their skin sparkled with frost. Their clothes were decades out of date. One woman's dress fluttered in the wind like brittle paper. A child's scarf blew sideways, stiff as wood. Lena screamed, slamming the gear into reverse out of pure instinct. The engine didn't move, didn't even click. The figures stepped closer. One child raised his hand and pressed it against the trunk. Ice spread outward from the point of contact, crawling across the metal in seconds. Panic surged through Lena's blood. She threw her whole body weight forward and slammed her hand against the horn. The sound blared through the desert. The figures didn't flinch. The clerk tapped on her window again, harder now. "Ain't no use fighting it," he murmured. "Storm gets everyone eventually." His breath fogged the glass, but not like a living person's breath. His fog froze instantly, leaving behind frosted crystals. Lena's mind spiraled into terror. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her dead phone, and out of pure desperation, pressed the power button. The screen flickered. Once, twice, then glowed weakly. Signal bars appeared. 1, then 2, then full bars. She gasped in disbelief. Yes, yes. She dialed 911. The phone didn't ring. It made a sound like the line was underwater, bubbling and crackling, before a voice answered. A voice she recognized. The clerk's voice. "Ain't no service out here," he whispered through the phone speaker. "Ain't no call going anywhere." Lena dropped the phone like it burned. She scrambled out of the car and sprinted into the storm, running blindly down Route 12. Snow blinding her, wind slicing her skin. Behind her, she heard footsteps, slow, numerous. Following her, she didn't look back. Couldn't. The desert road stretched endlessly into white oblivion. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs shook, until the cold numbed her fingers into uselessness. She finally collapsed beside an old mile marker, sobbing into the snow. The storm howled. The cold seeped into her bones. Her vision dimmed. She whispered her grandmother's name, and then headlights. A truck screeched to a stop beside her. A man jumped out, a real man, warm breath steaming in the air, flashlights, heavy jacket. "Hey, hey, you okay?" She tried to answer, but only a broken sob escaped. The man wrapped his coat around her and helped her into the truck. "Jesus, you're freezing. What are you doing out here?" Asterisk snow beat against the windshield in frantic bursts as Deputy Mark Hensley guided his cruiser through the darkness of Highway 41, the remote stretch of pine-lined road that ran from the edge of town to the foothills where the old ranger cabins sat abandoned. It was Christmas Eve, and the storm had rolled in faster than any forecast predicted, swallowing the world in white and muting every sound except the low hum of the heaterette. Fought a losing battle against the cold creeping into the cabin of his vehicle. Mark had worked Christmas Eve shifts before drunk drivers, lonely wanderers, and the old domestic dispute, but tonight felt wrong, heavy in a way he couldn't name. The kind of night where the darkness seemed thicker, more deliberate. Dispatch had radioed him 30 minutes earlier about a distress call. A woman's voice crying for help from somewhere along Highway 41. But before the call cut out, her last words came through with crackling terror. "It's walking toward me. Please, please, don't let it open the door." The call came from an unregistered number, somewhere near mile marker 19. The part of the highway locals avoided after sundown because of the stories Mark never believed. Stories older deputies whispered. Strange silhouettes crossing the empty road. Travelers found frozen, solid, with expressions twisted in terror. And a figure seen knocking on car windows during blizzards. He told himself not to let it get to him, but as the snowstorm intensified and visibility shrank to a few yards, he realized he hadn't seen another car in nearly an hour. When the faint glow of an abandoned blue sedan came into view, half buried in the drifting snow near the tree line, his gut twisted. He pulled over, stepped out, and the cold slapped him so hard his eyes watered instantly. The air was unnaturally quiet, as if sound itself froze. He approached the car, flashlight beam trembling as he swept it across frost-coated windows. The driver's door hung slightly open, snow packed inside as if the storm had reached in to claim it. "Sheriff's Department, hello." His voice cracked across the wind, but no answer came. Inside the car lay a purse, scattered receipts, a broken cell phone, and the faint smell of something metallic, like old pennies. Human footprints led away from the vehicle toward the forest, not running, but stumbling, as though the person who walked here was trying to move quietly, trying not to be heard. Mark radioed dispatch. "I've located the vehicle. No sign of the caller. I'm going into the woods to check for injuries." Static answered him. Not the usual kind, this was thick, garbled, like something breathing across the frequency. He swallowed hard and followed the prints into the tree line, where the snow absorbed every sound and the towering pines leaned inward like silent witnesses. 100 feet in, he spotted something through the branches of faint glow, flickering. As he got closer, he realized it came from an old ranger cabin, long abandoned since the fire in the 90s, but tonight its dirty windows pulsed with a sickly yellow light. Footprints led directly to the door. Mark stepped up onto the sagging porch, feeling the boards groan beneath his weight. The air smelled of smoke and something else, something sweet, rotting. He drew his gun and gently pushed the door open. What he saw inside made his breath hitch. A woman sat in the center of the room, rocking back and forth, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her long hair hanging over her face. A single lantern burned weakly beside her. "Ma'am," Mark whispered. She stopped rocking. Slowly, she lifted her head, and her eyes were wide, glazed. Unfocused but filled with terror, so raw it made Mark's knees weaken. "It's still outside," she whispered hoarsely. "It's waiting." Mark crouched in front of her, trying to keep his voice steady. "What's waiting? Did someone attack you?" She shook her head violently. "Not someone. Something. It knocked on my car window. It called my name." "How did it know my name?" Mark's heart hammered painfully. "You saw it." She nodded, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. "Tall, wrong, like a shadow wearing a face that isn't finished." Before Mark could respond, a sound cut through the building. 3 slow knocks on the cabin door. The woman screamed and covered her ears. Mark jumped to his feet, weapon raised. Another knock. But it wasn't just a knock, he could hear something dragging its nails down the wood after each one. Then, a voice, muffled but chillingly clear. "Maria, you left the car. You shouldn't have left the car." Mark felt the blood drain from his body. "Is that your name?" She nodded, sobbing. The voice continued, distorted like someone learning how to mimic speech for the first time. "Let me inside. It's cold." Mark yelled, "This is the sheriff's department. Identify yourself." Silence followed. Then, louder, knock. The lantern flickered violently, shadows stretching across the walls like they were alive, reaching. "We're leaving," Mark said, grabbing Maria's hand. She resisted. "It's faster than us. It waits for us to move." Another knock, this time from the cabin's back wall, then another from the side window. Whatever it was circling the cabin, searching for a way in. Mark pulled Maria to her feet, forcing her to move. They slipped out the back door and into the trees, Mark holding her up as she stumbled. The woods felt tighter now, as if the trees themselves shifted closer. Behind them, the voice called out again, but from a different direction. "Maria, don't run." Mark pressed the radio. "Dispatch, I need immediate assistance. Possible assailant in the woods." Static responded, again, but underneath it, faintly, he heard his own message repeated back, warped, imitated. "I need immediate assistance." Maria whimpered. "It uses voices. It's learning." Mark dragged her toward the road, but the forest was disorienting. The snow falling so heavily they could barely see the ground. Then, ahead of them, they spotted headlights dim, flickering but real. A tow truck idled near the abandoned sedan. A man stepped out, bundled in heavy winter gear. "Hey," Mark shouted with relief. "We need help." The tow truck driver waved. "Thought I saw lights up the road. Storm's bad tonight. You folks are right." Maria clung to Mark, shaking her head violently. No, don't talk to him. It's tricking you." Mark wanted to tell her she was in shock, but then he saw the driver step fully into the light. His arms were too long, his posture crooked, and his face wrong, too smooth, too stretched, like skin pulled over something that didn't know how to wear it. The creature tilted its head. "Cold night," it said, voice perfectly normal to normal. Then it smiled, the skin around its mouth tearing slightly, revealing gums that gleamed with frost. Mark fired. The figure jerked, but didn't fall. It only twitched, like it was confused by the impact. Then it began walking toward them, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet controlled by trembling strings. Mark pulled Maria and ran. Branches whipped their faces, snow blinded them, and the thing followed, each step crunching in slow, deliberate rhythm. They reached the road, but no cars passed. Nothing but endless white stretching into darkness. Maria fell to her knees. "It won't stop. I saw it chase another man. It doesn't stop." Mark lifted her, adrenaline surging. They trudged through knee-deep snow until Mark's cruiser finally came into sight. He shoved Maria inside and started the engine. The headlights lit up. The road and the creature stood directly in front of them, its limbs now elongated, almost dragging. Its face had changed again, jaw unhinged slightly, eyes black and reflective like ice. Mark slammed the car into reverse and spun the cruiser around, speeding down the highway toward town. The mirrors were useless in the storm, but Maria stared out the rear window, whispering, "It's running." Mark didn't want to look. but he heard it something thundering across the snow behind them. Too fast, too heavy. The radio crackled again. His name this time. Slow down. He shut the radio off and floored the accelerator, the cruiser fishtailing through drifts. They didn't stop until the first signs of town appeared, streetlights glowing through the storm like distant candles. Maria exhaled a sob of relief, but Mark knew something was wrong. Town was dead silent. No Christmas lights glowing in windows. No cars on the street. And the snow here was undisturbed, as if nothing and no one had moved in hours. Mark pulled up to the station, helping Maria inside. The building was dark, except for one flickering bulb in the hallway. "Hello?" Mark called. No answer. He pushed open the squad room door and froze. Every officer, every dispatcher, sat upright in their chairs, eyes open, faces pale. Frozen, solid. Not frostbitten. Frozen like statues carved from ice. Maria covered her mouth, choking back a scream. A sound echoed behind them, the door closing softly. Mark turned. Something stood in the entrance of the station, its silhouette tall, wrong, shifting subtly like a shadow in water. "It followed us," Maria whispered. The creature stepped into the dim light, its form completely changed again, now resembling one of the officers, but only partially finished, like a mold that hadn't fully set. "Cold in here," it said in a voice that wasn't human anymore. Mark aimed his gun, but he knew it wouldn't matter. The thing smiled wide, wider than a face should stretch. The road was lonely tonight, needed someone new to follow. Mark grabbed Maria and pushed her through the back exit as the creature glided forward, its footsteps silent now. Snow blasted them as they ran into the stormy night. Maria slipped, fell, screamed Mark's name. He turned, reaching for her, but she was yanked backward into the darkness, her scream cutting off instantly. The snowstorm had arrived with almost no warning, a sudden whiteout that swallowed the small town of Hollow Creek in northern Vermont, turning Frostwood Road into a narrow, treacherous path lined with pine trees bowed under the weight of ice and snow. Nathan Blake had been driving for hours, a route he thought he knew like the back of his hand, trying to reach a remote rental cabin he and his friends had booked for a quiet Christmas getaway. The trip had begun with laughter, holiday music, and cups of hot cocoa from the gas station in town. But as the highway narrowed and the snow thickened, the mood had shifted from excitement to unease. The headlights barely penetrated the wall of white, and every bend in the road seemed to hide shadowy shapes just beyond visibility. Nathan's anxiety grew with every mile, but he forced himself to keep driving, repeating the mantra that he would reach the cabin, warm up the fireplace, and everything would be fine. Hours passed. The blizzard intensified. His car's tires slid over black ice more than once, and every time he swerved to avoid an invisible obstacle, his heart leaped into his throat. Finally, he saw the faint outline of the cabin through the snowy, solitary structure, its roof blanketed in heavy frost, smoke curling weakly from the chimney. Relief surged through him. He parked, grabbed his bag, and ran across the snow-covered walkway, slipping on the ice near the front steps. The door creaked as he opened it, the warmth from the small wood stove inside a sudden, sweet relief. But something felt off. The cabin was larger than he remembered from the photos online, and there was an odd silence that seemed to press against his eardrums. No welcome sign, no scent of cedar or pine, just cold, dusty air and the faint smell of old smoke. He dropped his bag near the hearth and turned on the lights. The bulbs flickered weakly, struggling against the storm outside, casting shadows across the walls that seemed to shift unnaturally. Nathan's phone had no signal, no Wi-Fi, nothing, just as he was about to call out for his friends. The sound of a door closing echoed through the cabin, though he hadn't seen anyone enter. His pulse quickened. "Hello," he called, voice shaking. No answer. He moved to check the bedrooms, each step creaking in the empty building. All doors were shut, and inside, the rooms were exactly as he and his friends had left them, yet the sense of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the edge of sight, tightened around him like a vice. As he returned to the living room, he noticed something he hadn't seen before: faint footprints in the dust near the fireplace, small, uneven, leading toward the back door. Nathan froze. There had been no one else in the cabin, had there? He leaned closer, trying to make sense of the prints, when he heard Italo's scratching sound at the back door. He spun around, heart pounding, and saw the handle slowly turning. He wanted to call out, to tell whoever it was to stop, but his voice failed him. The door opened an inch, and he could see only darkness beyond the threshold, a darkness that seemed to pulse with intent. Then the door swung fully open on its own. A figure stepped inside, pale, thin, hunched, wearing a tattered coat that hung in uneven strips, and its face was obscured by a thick scarf. Nathan's stomach dropped. Who are you?" he stammered. The figure didn't answer. It moved slowly, deliberately, toward the stairs. Nathan backed away, hitting the couch, and the figure paused, head tilting unnaturally, like it was studying him, savoring the moment. Then it stepped forward again, dragging its feet lightly across the wooden floor. The sound was hollow, unnatural. Panic surged through Nathan. He turned toward the fireplace, grabbed a heavy poker, and swung it at the figure, but it didn't react. It simply continued its slow, eerie advance. Nathan realized then that the figure's shadow moved differently from its body, stretching, twisting across the walls like living smoke. His hands shook, his teeth chattering, though the stove still glowed faintly. Then came the whisper, a voice low, rasping, almost too soft to be heard over the wind outside. "You shouldn't be here. It's waiting." Nathan froze, recognizing the words from a story his grandmother had told him as a child about Frostwood Road, about travelers who vanished near the cabins each winter, about figures in black that roamed the woods and the houses when the snow fell too fast, when the lights flickered too long. His rational mind screamed that it was impossible. This was just some intruder, some madman. But the smell of frost and decay that clung to the figure's coat, made him realize it was something else entirely. Something that had been outside, in the storm, longer than any human could survive. Nathan backed toward the staircase. The figure followed, silently, deliberately, not touching the ground but seeming to float just above it. As he reached the top of the stairs, he saw more footprints in the dust on the hallway floor, leading to each bedroom. None of them belonged to anyone he had seen before. Then he heard a soft giggle, a child's voice from the bedroom at the end of the hall. His friends had no children. They were all adults. Nathan's throat went dry. He gripped the railing and peered down the hallway. The door creaked open slowly. Inside, the room was empty. Only a small, frost-covered doll sat upright on the bed, eyes staring directly at him. He stepped closer. The doll wasn't one he recognized, but there was something disturbingly familiar about it, as if it had been waiting for him. The doll's eyes flicked just slightly as he approached, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. Then he heard it again, whispering from the shadows, "Don't leave." He spun around. The figure had moved to the other end of the hall, now accompanied by another 2 figures, then 3, emerging from every dark corner of the cabin, all hunched, all pale, all silent, all gliding across the floor. Nathan's rational mind began to fracture. He ran downstairs, hoping to escape through the front door, only to find it wide open, snow spilling into the cabin. The wind howled, carrying faint echoes of the whispers, now multiple voices, layered and overlapping. "Stay, stay, stay." He backed into the living room, his eyes scanning desperately for a weapon. The fireplace poker lay on the floor. He grabbed it and braced himself. Then the lights flickered again, going out, leaving the room bathed in darkness except for the faint glow of the stove. The figures were gone. Silence pressed against him. He dared to breathe, and then he saw them. Through the windows, shadowy shapes circling the cabin in the storm, moving faster than they should have been able to. Shapes hunched like old men, yet impossibly long-limbed. He tried to call out. No sound emerged. He tried to run. The cabin door slammed shut on its own. The stove went out. The room plunged into icy blackness. Panic gripped him, lungs burning, heart racing. He pounded the door, but the figure's whispers returned, now closer, inside the cabin. "Why did you come? You shouldn't have come." The air turned heavy, suffocating, frost forming on his eyelashes. The temperature dropped so rapidly that his breath crystallized instantly. He realized he couldn't move. His arms stiffened. His legs became frozen blocks. The doll from the bedroom now sat on the hearth, facing him, eyes gleaming in the faint starlight filtering through the windows. He could feel their presence pressing against him from all sides, surrounding, closing in. He tried to swing the poker, but it fell to the ground, shattering. And then they were upon him, shadows dissolving into his vision, touching his skin like cold water, freezing every nerve, every muscle. His scream echoed, muffled, trapped inside his own head. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him completely was the cabin itself, its windows glowing faintly in the storm, as if welcoming another soul to the endless night. Hours later, a passing ranger spotted a car abandoned on Frostwood Road. Snow had buried the tracks leading to the cabin. When the ranger entered, the cabin was empty, furniture untouched, fireplace cold, no footprints besides the ones Nathan had made on his arrival. The storm had erased every sign of struggle, but the doll remained on the hearth, pale and frost-covered, eyes somehow brighter than before, and locals, when asked years later about the cabin, would only shake their heads and whisper, "If you ever see Frostwood Road in a whiteout, don't stop. Don't even blink. The cabin, it waits, and it doesn't let anyone leave." The snow had started falling lightly at first, delicate, almost festive, covering the quiet suburban streets of Maplewood, New Hampshire, in a soft white blanket. But by late afternoon on Christmas Eve, it had thickened into a heavy, relentless storm that swallowed the town in near-complete silence, muffling the usual holiday cheer of carolers, children playing, and neighbors exchanging greetings. Samantha Hayes had just finished decorating her living room for the holiday, stringing lights along the mantel, placing ornaments on the tree, and setting out freshly baked cookies on the counter for her parents and her younger brother, Max, who were arriving later that evening, when she heard the faint creak of her front door. Her house was locked, windows shut, and no one had keys except her and her family. Samantha froze, heart hammering, listening intently. Another creak, this time from the porch. She looked through the frosted window and saw nothing at first, only snow swirling in the wind. Dim orange streetlights casting a pale glow on the quiet neighborhood. Then she noticed movement at the end of Ivy Lane, where the Hendersons' house had stood empty for months. The shutters were closed, the driveway covered in snow, but a figure appeared at the far window, standing completely still, almost blending with the shadows. Samantha's pulse quickened. She locked the door again, but the sound of footsteps on snow drifted closer, slow, deliberate, crunching against the icy sidewalk. She ran to the kitchen, her phone in hand, trying to dial her parents' house. But there was no signal, no dial tone, nothing. Panic began to rise. She heard the footsteps stop. Then, faintly, a knock at the door. One, then another. A rhythm, slow, deliberate, almost playful in a way that made her stomach turn. She peeked through the peephole and saw the figure of a man, tall, thin, dressed in dark winter clothes, his face obscured by a scarf and hood. He was standing perfectly still, staring directly at the door. Samantha's throat went dry. "Who is it?" she whispered, but no answer came. She considered calling the police, but the storm had made the streets nearly impassable, and she knew they wouldn't arrive quickly, if at all. The figure raised a hand and knocked again, harder this time. Something in his movement too slow, too precise made her feel wrong in ways she couldn't describe. She backed away, heart hammering, trying to think rationally. Then another shadow appeared behind him, indistinct at first, flickering at the edge of the porch light. Samantha stepped back and stumbled over a chair, making a loud noise. The figures didn't flinch, didn't move, but their presence felt heavier, more suffocating, as if the warmth in the room had been drained entirely. She grabbed a kitchen knife and held it in front of her, trembling. The knocking continued, faster now, louder, echoing unnaturally across the snow-covered street. Her mind raced. Who were they? What did they want? She backed into the living room, trying to get a glimpse of the street, and then she realized something that made her blood run cold. The streetlights were flickering in sequence, as if signaling to the figures, or the figures to the street. Shadows elongated unnaturally across the snow, stretching toward her house, slithering like black liquid across the icy driveways of her neighbors' homes. Samantha's family had yet to arrive, and the storm had probably delayed them by hours. The figure at her door raised an arm again, and through the small gap beneath the scarf, a smile appeared. Too wide, too sharp. She stumbled backward. The lights in the house flickered, then went out completely, leaving only the faint glow of Christmas lights on the tree. Shadows inside her own living room began to shift, moving along the walls. The figures outside didn't enter immediately, they didn't need to. Their presence seeped into the house, cold, heavy, like the storm itself had taken shape. Samantha pressed herself against the wall, holding the knife tight, listening. Then she heard it, the faintest whisper, drifting through the closed door. "Come out." It's warmer outside. Her breath hitched. She forced herself to stand, creeping to the window, peering through the frost. One figure had moved closer to the porch, lifting a gloved hand toward the glass. Another appeared at the side of the house, almost as if it had walked through the snow without leaving tracks. Panic rose in her chest. She thought of calling out to her parents, but the words froze in her throat. The figures began to move in unison now, slow, gliding across the yard, forming a circle around her house, cutting off any chance of escape. Samantha backed away from the window, realizing the doors would not keep them out for long. Her mind raced. She grabbed her laptop, hoping to call someone through Wi-Fi, but the screen was dead. The battery drained in seconds. She tried to plug it in. Nothing. The figures moved closer, the crunch of snow beneath their boots faint, as if absorbed by the storm, leaving no trail. Then a sound like the high-pitched ringing of glass filled the room. The Christmas tree lights flickered violently, casting long, twisted shadows across the walls. Samantha screamed, clutching her head. The ringing stopped. Silence. For a moment, she thought they had retreated. Then the whisper came again, closer, from behind the living room door. "We know you're alone. Come out. It's Christmas." Her stomach twisted. She realized the voice mimicked her own mother's tone perfectly. The familiar warmth replaced with malice, distorted, wrong. Samantha backed into the kitchen, trying to barricade herself. Every object she moved seemed to fall away, as if unseen hands pulled them aside. Then she heard a sound above her, a creaking in the ceiling, slow and deliberate, like footsteps pacing the attic. She ran to the staircase, intending to reach the second floor, but as she stepped up, the figures at the windows now, all windows, suddenly slammed their hands against the glass simultaneously. The force rattled the frames, making the entire house tremble. The whispers escalated, layered, echoing from every wall, every corner, every shadow. "Come, join us. Don't be alone." Samantha ran into the upstairs hallway, the storm outside howling louder, almost as if it were chanting in rhythm with the whispers. She reached the guest bedroom, slammed the door, and pressed her body against it, trying to keep quiet. But the silence was broken by another sound, the faint jingling of sleigh bells. Not from outside, from inside the room. Her eyes darted around. The closet door, slightly ajar, began to creak open by itself. A cold draught swept the room, extinguishing the single candle she had lit. The darkness pressed in, thick, heavy, living. And then, through the darkness, she saw them. Figures emerging from every corner of the room, hoods low, pale skin barely visible beneath layers of frost. Their eyes black voids. One stepped forward, gliding silently, and the whisper became louder, clearer, almost understandable. "You've been alone too long. It's your turn." Samantha screamed, backing into the far wall. The figures stopped, their movements jerky, like marionettes, tilting their heads as if savoring her terror. She lunged for the window, trying to escape, but the glass was suddenly opaque, frosted from the inside. No escape. She turned, only to find the door to the hallway closed, locked, though she had not touched it. The figures advanced, step by step, until she was pressed into the corner. The floor beneath her seemed to freeze solid, her limbs stiffening with a cold that was not natural. She tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive presence. One figure raised its arm, pointing directly at her. Its shadow stretched across the walls, reaching out like a living thing, engulfing her. Samantha's vision blurred, the room twisting, the walls closing in. The whispers grew louder, now hundreds of voices overlapping. Join us, forever alone. Her eyes fell on the Christmas tree lights, flickering wildly, and she realized with horror that the figures were reflected in the ornaments. Their faces twisted and frozen, multiplied endlessly. The storm outside began to howl in response, the wind screaming through the cracks in the house like the wails of lost souls. Then the door to the room slammed open violently, throwing her to the ground. The figures were gone. Silence. The storm outside abated, the snow falling gently once more. Samantha scrambled to the window, her hands shaking, and saw the streets empty. All of Ivy Lane seemed frozen in time. She ran downstairs, opened the front door, and looked out. Not a footprint, not a single trace of the figures that had haunted her. The only sound was the faint jingle of sleigh bells fading into the distance. Samantha backed into the house, shaking uncontrollably. She called her parents repeatedly. No answer. She tried to leave. The snow had erased her tracks. She opened the door. A black shadow passed across the threshold. She spun, but there was nothing there. Only the faint impression of hoods, of empty eyes, and the whisper again, next Christmas. We'll be waiting, alone. The town of Maplewood woke the next morning to a serene, snowy Christmas. But Samantha Hayes was never seen again, and a Henderson house at the end of Ivy Lane remained empty, windows shuttered, lights dark. Though locals swore on snowy nights they could hear faint jingling, whispers, and the slow, deliberate creak of steps circling the abandoned houses. Travelers avoided Ivy Lane entirely, and every year the story circulated quietly in town. Never be alone on Christmas Eve, and never answer the door when the shadows come calling.